Budget discussion
Tommy.
and deliberation. And so we'll take that up first. And Chris, I guess if you've got any comments to get us going or whatever.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, the original budget was presented on March the 17th, and of course we presented a modified budget post-COVID in April and held a couple of work sessions with the board. And of course, ending last week in the public hearings for the proposed modified budget for fiscal year 2021, as well as the public hearings for the tax rates and the reassessment. Of course, those public hearings were held by the board, and at that time the board scheduled today's meeting this afternoon for further discussion and deliberation. And so if the board has any questions of the proposed modified budget, certainly staff is here to entertain any questions or gather any further guidance from the board at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we're open now for discussion of a modified budget that staff has prepared with the best information they have today.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll start off. We are worried about the businesses in Franklin County, and that's good, don't get me wrong. But the big business I'm worried about is Franklin County. We depend on tax money to keep this county going, and right now we're pretty short. And I think the time to ante up is now. Like I said, we depend on tax money. We're not going to get it, and we can't afford to give out any more. Well, I know it's been talked about the fund balance. Well, if we take money out of the fund balance, where are we going to put it back? If you take out $1 million this year, you got to put back down $1 million next year plus another $1 million. And I can't see robbing that, because that is part of our business that people look when we borrow money. The contingency fund, I feel the same way about that. If something happens at the landfill or whatever, something breaks down, how are we going to pay for it? And we really can't be pulling that money out, especially when we don't know what the governor's going to do, what we're going to be getting from the state. So if we pulled out $1 million today, and you turn right around and the state cuts us another $1 million or $2 million, what we're going to do? Well, I've heard talk 3 times about the 2-time taxes. Well, that hen ain't laid the egg yet. That'll be 2 years before we see that. So I'm gonna copy what Ms. Smith said. We gotta have due diligence to this county. And we need to set everything aside, and I think his budget should be passed. We can always visit every quarter and see if things are better. If you are, then maybe we pick up some things. But right now, we don't know what the state's gonna do to us. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the budget stands.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I hear what Mr. Cummings is saying, and I agree with what most of what he said. I think all of us would like to do something for our taxpayers, for our citizens, and you know, it's a troubled time. We're in troubled waters, and you know, I would like to see us give some relief to our citizens, but I'm not so sure that we can do that at the the failing of the county. We've got to look at, it takes X amount of dollars to run this government. And I don't see that it would be responsible for us to, in an attempt to help our taxpayers, our citizens, and then break our bank or get to the point where we have to lay off or furlough our employees. I don't think that's prudent. I would like to see us in a way to give some relief to our citizens, I would still support a nickel cut on personal property. I think that's doable and not put our budget into complete jeopardy. And, I for one, was all for using the excess amount in our fund balance to get us over the hump. And I met with Mr. Whitlow, I talked to some others, I talked to some other outside advisors, people that I have a lot of respect for, and they have all told me the same thing, it's just not good practice. We do have a plan to put the money back when we can start collecting twice a year. That's in 2 years. We had bit the bullet 2 years ago, and passed it then, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be looking at that windfall coming up here this year. We didn't. We put it off, and so we can't rely on that because, as Mr. Clinton said, that didn't hit play yet. I don't think, I will not support a budget that compromises our county employees and puts them into where they have to worry about if we're going to lay them off the furlough. I would love to see, like I said, some relief given to our citizens, and I would support a 5-cent reduction in personal property rate, which would cost us about $280,000. That would have to be found somehow, worked out by staff. I know it would be a burden, but I think they would be up to the task. Also, it worries me to take the big step now and equalize the tax rate and to help our people. And we come in August and September and we get hammered by the state. Where do we turn it in? We've got to keep something in play. My question was, what's the use of having a fund balance? What's the use of having a rainy day fund if you're not going to use it when it's raining? And it's raining pretty hard out there right now on our citizens. But we also, if we start tapping into that, when we know that in the near future we're going to be looking at the possibility of borrowing more money, we tap into it just a little. We need to look at the big picture, how much it's going to cost us down the road. And if I'm not mistaken, if we tap into it with $1 million, what we would have to pay in increased rates, it costs us a couple to $10 million when it's all said and done. So that's not, in my small mind, that's not good proof of it. It's a hard decision, it's a hard one to make. That's why we're here, to make the tough decision. I would like to see us give our citizens some relief, and I'll reiterate, I would support a 5-cent reduction of personal property at this time to give that relief. Not everyone in Franklin County owns property, but everyone, just about everyone owns a car or 2 or 3, and we can give some relief there. We all want to help our citizens, but I just don't think we can do it at the risk of breaking the bank. With everything that's going on, we don't know what we're going to see come August and September, and that really worries me. I hope Tommy's right, that things are going to hit running, and we're going to land on our feet. But as he said earlier, that hand hasn't laid yet either.
That's right.
And so I'm with Tommy. If I will support the budget as presented. If enough people won't support 5-cent reduction, but I would love to see us do a 5-cent reduction on personal property. That's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir.
We were elected to this board as leaders. Leland, I consider you a leader. Tim, a leader. Tommy, a leader. Lori, Ronnie. It's up to us to lead this county in the correct direction. I want the 5-cent reduction in the personal property tax. I want us to equalize this real estate tax rate. And I want us to use some of this money out of the revenue fund. I want to read to you all from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. The portion of the fund balance that is not reserved is fittingly called unreserved fund balance. It represents resources that can be used for any purpose of the fund they are reported in. Unreserved fund balance in a debt service fund can be used to repay any outstanding debt. Unreserved fund balance in the general fund can be used for any purpose at all. And now is the time for us to use that money. The people in this county are hurting. I've seen this board and this government shift money around in capital fund accounts. The county is a long ways from broke. $2 million out of that fund balance is a drop in the bucket. I won't support any budget that doesn't meet those three things. And that's where I'm at.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to stand with Mike Carter on this. I think to leave the tax rates where they're at and not show any support for our citizens, just not a good thing. I appreciate him wanting to at least the personal property cut. I agree with Mike. I look at the fund balance, and I'm talking about, if you look at it as a whole, it's 20-some million. The 18 million, I don't believe in touching that. I believe that needs to stay there for credit ratings. But the 2 million above and beyond, just like Mike said, I think we should be able to use that whenever we want. We talk about the credit rating. Well, from a business-minded perspective, with what's going on in the country right now, I don't see us asking for any loans in the near future. So does a credit rating really have that much importance in the immediate year, maybe 2 years, when in 2 years we're going to have the twice-year tax collection money come in to hopefully replenish above and beyond the 18 million before we look to start borrowing money. As I've said before, I've harped on volunteer fire departments. This budget doesn't have, and I know there's restrictions with the coronavirus as far as funds, and we're going to play this by ear, but I'm going to add to Mr. Carter and say that no additional funding for the volunteers at this time. I will not support this budget either. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Guess it's my turn,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. This is a very, very tough budgetary environment for most localities. I would say all localities throughout the Commonwealth. And these decisions are very, very difficult in our role as advocates and representatives of our constituencies. And also to do our fiscal job in protecting the services that we provide to the citizens. So there's two sides to the coin, and so therein is how do we balance what we do as a board so that we acknowledge the hardships of our citizens, which are there for sure. The county is a business. Our business communities are suffering, there's no question about that. So what I look for is how do we move through this? Will we have a relatively quick outcome where the economy bounces back? We don't know that. I know I talked with Delegate Poindexter this morning, and he is optimistic that the turnaround is going to be sooner than expected at this juncture, which I'm encouraged about. So what I guess I want to address this in a couple very concise ways. The fund balance, for me, we should not touch it. And I've always used that best fiscal practice. I'll quote to you from Davenport's latest memorandum to us, advising us as our financial advisors. I quote, unassigned fund balance is viewed as the single most important credit consideration for the local government's bond rating. Why is that important? It's important because we know as a municipality, we're going to be going back to the bond market. We are going to be borrowing money in the future for capital projects, and we have ongoing debt service. So that tells me that we should not be doing anything to put the county in an adverse circumstance that's going to cost the taxpayers yet more money. And that $2 million, if it were to be used, it's going to have to be put back. And I think the suggestion is to use one-time monies for operating. And that is, in my book, and in my estimation, something that's not fiscally prudent. I would even go as far to say that it's somewhat irresponsible. And so that's not been my current practice. I think that desperate times do call for desperate measures. I think we've got a modified budget. It's not what we want. It's what I think we can do to keep things afloat and move into when our economy improves. The money that's been suggested with respect to the twice-a-year taxation, that one-time pool of money, we as a board have talked about using a portion of that to pay down debt, to pay down our debt service. And I am in full support of that. We'll get further advice down the road when that's before us. But I think that we've got to be mindful that in Davenport's financial portfolio to this county in 2019, it is clear from their projected models that there were 3 tax increases put in their modeling up until 2025 based on the county's current debt service load at that time. That's with nothing else on the table. It didn't anticipate COVID. It didn't anticipate the possibility that the state could come in July, early August, and tell us that they're going to cut us by a couple $1 million or more. Where we're going to get that? So, worst comes to worst at this juncture. That $2 million, in my estimation, should not be touched. If we find that the county is in a position of peril, if you will, with state cuts, I think more things are going to have to be on the table for consideration. I do not want to make a short-term decision that's going to have adverse long-term impacts. We are charged as a board to make not only short-term decisions, but to make decisions that we feel confident are going to carry the county into its future in a healthy way. And so taking the long view is something that we must do as a board. I could be in favor of a 5-cent decrease in personal property taxation. I think that, there's no question. I would love to equalize the tax rate. I think, in ordinary times that would be the right thing to do, or at least do a percentage of that. Unfortunately, we're not in a fiscal environment that's going to allow that without pains to the citizens in forms of reduction in services. That may seem like something easy to talk about, but I will guarantee you, if we get to a point of reducing services, we're going to be getting calls from our constituents. Why are the green box sites only open 2 days a week? Why is the grass not mowed in the park? Why is the library only open 2 days a week? These are going to be real impacts that are felt, and believe you me, when we take things away, it is extremely hard to put them back. It's very hard. So I support the modified budget as presented with I can and will support a 5-cent decrease in personal property taxes if that's the desire of the board. And I do not think that it is prudent to touch the fund balance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question I'd like to ask for Mr. Whitlow.
Yes, sir.
Chris, what's the possibility of the near future of us looking at borrowing or refinancing some of our old debt to take advantage of some of the lower interest rates, and would maintaining a strong bond rating be to our benefit now? I guess it's something Mr. Mitchell said that has triggered it. It might be a possibility that maybe come up sooner than later. What are we looking at there? And by doing that, if we could get a lower interest rate and lower our debt service to that could be putting very money back into our budget. What's it look like?
Mr. Tatum, I think, and we may have shared, staff may have shared with the board, that in discussions with our financial advisors, the county financial advisors, to look at our current portfolio, the latest borrowing in 2017, and of course, the more recent interim financing of the closure of the landfill, and the fact that the bond market, the rates are very competitive at this time. The financial advisors plan to resubmit, if you will, an updated portfolio of what that could possibly look like, and the likelihood of potentially refinancing that debt as early as late summer. And so we could be potentially, if the market continues to be strong in terms of favorable, I should say, in terms of the rates, it would likely be the recommendation, if that still holds the case, as I said, with the favorable rates, that we could be looking potentially, if the board's desire to refinance late summer, early fall. And of course, in terms of the ratings and so forth, again, the ratings would still play into that. Your interest rate is based on a lot of different things in terms of bank qualified financing, and of course, I'd ask Mr. Brian Carter, our finance director, if he has anything further to add in that in terms of the scheduling. But we have had that conversation with the financial advisors of looking for opportunities to try to get our current debt service down, because that is real money, it is reoccurring.
I can expound a little bit on what Mr. Whitlow said, which is the 2018 borrowing that we did for the business park was bond anticipation notes. They expire in 2023. We're paying interest only on those now. So what Davenport has looked at for us is we are able to now call those anticipation notes and basically refinance. So if it's a favorable bond market, they would do that, as we would have to do in the next 2-3 years anyway, and finalize that debt. And then if there's any other existing debt, we would roll that in on top of it. The other thing that we want to be cautious of is the middle school HVAC. I've heard school board updates and school staff updates of the air quality is getting bad on it, and so that very well within the next 12 months could need to be an emergency borrowing. There are options on that, literary fund or literary loans, not necessarily county debt per se, it'd be a conduit to the state. But those are the two things in my mind that would be in the next 12 months that could be packaged.
If you don't mind, just to add, the statement I made about not borrowing in the next year or so is based off of projection. If they're right, no, we're not going to borrow it. If Tommy's right, the market, everything's going to go back to normal faster than they anticipate. They're planning for the worst. Based off what they're planning for, I don't see how we could borrow money. As I've shown huge support over the HVAC at the middle school, I wish the twice-year tax collection money would come in sooner so we could just do it and be done and get the air quality where it needs to be. But I think you're right. It might come before that, which we could always pay it off with that money if we so choose. But let me ask you a question. So I expressed my concern about laying county employees off and how I would not support anything that would do that, as did Tim, Mr. Taylor also mentioned. If we start talking about a personal property tax cut and or real estate tax cut, how much could we cut? This is a tough question, so I hope you're ready for it. How much could we cut where the county, hopefully not touching the $2 million? Let's take that off the table for just a second. I'm still with my part on this. How much could we cut in, say, personal property where we don't have to lay off any county employees?
In personal property?
Lori and Tim are saying 5 cents. Let's talk 10 cents.
The answer depends on the level you're willing to cut capital. The capital plan has a lot of items in it that include ambulance replacement, sheriff's fleet replacement, that are large dollar items. The level of the tax cut starts eating into those, and the rest of it is general maintenance. So some of that could probably be deferred. Some of it can't. Some of it are required debt service payments for fire trucks we purchased 3 years ago. Some of it's licensing agreements for IT infrastructure, things of that nature. So you could make some cuts to capital that would not cause an operating impact to employees. But if we have to move to the general fund, there's not a lot of areas to go very quickly. It's going to be cutting back operations. So it may not be furloughing employees, but it may be cutting out operating hours at a county facility. That would add up very quickly to me once you got out of the capital realm.
So let's talk about some of these reserve accounts, because I want to get out there, citizens are watching. Let's talk about all the reserve accounts the county has and how much money is in there.
Okay.
Name them all. I got a calculator right here.
In the capital fund, there are reserve accounts for what we consider some operating expenditures. I don't have the final balances in front of me. I can certainly get them for you. But there's a reassessment reserve, which we're currently going through, so we recommend touching that. There's our regional jail reserve. I wouldn't touch that because we had to scale back that budget just to balance it. We think we're going to overspend that based on where our jail population is right now. So we're going to need that reserve for next year. The juvenile detention center reserve could be a possibility if that population is down.
How much?
That's less than 100,000 if I remember correctly.
Call it 80.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere 75 to 80.
Brian, I've got your memo.
Do you have that? Thank
From
you.
February 20th
They
with the
haven't
list
really
of
changed.
reserves.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
That's the latest
I didn't think
update, is that the juvenile reserve's at 100,000.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I could, while they're looking at that, I'd like to remind the board, last November, we divvied up 1.5 million. We divvied up another 1.5 million in December. That was $3 million of excess funds we had last year. And I want each of you all to think long and hard about what you're going to tell these citizens when we start building that connector road out there at Summit View. And we've done nothing today to help them, because they're going to be asking that. How are we paying for that water tank? I'm getting these phone calls now. So think about this before you go for this budget that we're presenting. I know it's tough, and I know there's cuts, but it's tough times.
Well, Mike, I would say the connector road, that was part of the rationale, for funding some other
Well,
things.
the general public doesn't see it that way.
I
They see
understand.
that as us spending their tax
I
dollars.
understand.
And the debt service is their tax dollars.
It sure is, and that borrowing took place last year.
Right.
The money's there, it's done.
But they're not going to see it that way.
I understand,
They want relief now.
I understand.
And they want relief from this reassessment. And what are we going to do as a county when they get hit with this reassessment and they call up here and go, I can't pay my taxes? We're still not going to have the money.
So the capital project, I'm sorry, Rick,
No, go ahead.
the capital project reserve, Tech Lego Fire Station,
is that the one?
1.4.
That's what Mr. Carter was referencing in December, which was what was left out of the fiscal year 19 surplus. That capital reserve can be used for any project. I think we all know that the Glade Hill Fire Station is anticipated to be over our available funds, so that was probably priority project number one.
So the Glade Hill Fire Station would come out of the 1.4.
If bids came back exceeding budgeted funds, it would come out of the 1.4 to construct
If
that.
it exceeded budgeted funds, we've got 2.9 budgeted for it.
Yes.
So you're saying there's an additional 1.4 on top of the 2.9 for Glade Hill.
Right, the last A&E estimate for the Glade Hill Fire and EMS station was about $1 million over that 2.9 million. But that, till we get the final drawings and bid it, we won't know, but that's the estimate.
So, right there.
Yeah.
That gives us $500,000 right there. That's giving us $1 million to make sure Tommy gets this fire station. Because you got almost 1.5 in there now. So it's gonna take $1 million more.
Right.
There's $500,000 right there that we could use. Or what would be number 2 and number 3 on that capital? Before I step on my list here.
Well, we mentioned the connector road. I mean, we borrowed that money. It depends on what happens with the state grants. Right now we've got applications out for smart scale, revenue sharing money. So depending on how all that's awarded, and Ms. Burnett, Ms. Sandy, y'all correct me on this if I'm wrong, but overall on the project, we might need some money to do the whole plan anyway for what was left and borrowed for Southern View based on escalating costs and all the roads, network, and infrastructure we had to put in there. So probably the next bit, if we had to meet a match for that funding, would be to use the $500,000 for the connector road and business park.
So I'm all for Southern View, but not right now.
Right.
I think us continuing to just move forward and keep dumping money out there is just not a good move. Not right now, when we're talking about major cuts, possible furloughs, possible layoffs to make ends meet. So $500,000, I don't think we should consider that right now. That's just me speaking. Planning reserve, $77,000.
I don't know that that has any particular designated purpose right now.
Okay.
Mr. Sandy, is there anything? Planning reserve, I mean, we could use it for intergov. I know you have a system upgrade that has to be done. It's expiring October 2021.
That is, well, it's 40 plus some IT stuff, so 50, 55 is what we said that was gonna cost.
Yeah. And most of that is funded in the modified proposed budget right now, to be clear with you. But
Health insurance reserve is there in case we just need more money to make ends meet on health insurance, understand.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have a good year. I don't want to interfere with the Glade Hill Fire Station, but it seems like there's $500,000 in that fund.
that'd be one-time money. That would be back to, if we wanted to reduce, that's why I would be rather cut capital, because that's one time.
Understand.
Using it for operating gets harder to put back. Yes, sir.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I still say, we don't know what the state's gonna do. There's no use us jumping out on a limb until we know how heavy it is, especially me. But I still think we should wait to review this budget every quarter and see how things are going. It's nothing no worse. I know every time the federal government got a problem with your money, what did they do? They closed the parks, the recreation. And, you know, I used to carry my boys up Smartview, and it was terrible to get up there and bar across the road. And I think the people of this county deserve to keep everything open. I think with this corpus going on, and people finally getting ready to get outside to play, go down the river, do whatever, I think we need to keep everything open. Library, they got time to go out and read, get books. And I think recreation is the biggest thing that people look for from this county. And like I said, I think the budget's okay. I'd support the 5%. I told Mike I would. But other than that, we need to wait and see what the state's gonna do. Because if we take $500,000 now and we lose $3 million from the state, I mean, look what the school's 60-some% state and county. So we don't have a 4% to play with, if that much. And so I think, quote Laura again, due diligence, we should wait and see what the state's gonna do.
Okay, thank you. And, excuse me, anyone else wish to speak? I have a few comments, and one is, we don't have to make any designation for this money today, in my opinion. We're here to adopt, well, I guess we have to do it today, but that's our discussion, is to adopt a modified budget. And that budget is going to stay modified until we get information from the state. And I would like to see us, just my opinion, I heard from anyone else's, that we approve a modified budget as it is. And all of our discussion is on the table, and we can look at it later to see where we're at. And we are I know all of us are concerned as to what the state are going to cut, because we know they're going to cut. And there's a lot of areas that we could be cut that we've not discussed or maybe not even thought about. One of those deals heavily with the sheriff. He has no idea what's coming down, and his lifestyle here, he can't prepare for it until he knows. And that's where I see this forward. We're not prepared to make these decisions as far as spending money, I don't think today. And our first item is budget discussion and deliberation. We have done that. If we wish to approve this modified budget, Chris, I think we're able to do it, Ken.
Mr. Chairman, it's a pleasure of the board. Of course, the action that the board would need to take is the setting of the tax rates and the adoption of the budget too.
All right, that's our next item, is setting tax rates and adopting the budget. Now, I think we have pretty well discussed the setting of the tax rate. And if there's more discussion on that, I'll open the floor for that.
Got a comment?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate everybody's comments. Keep mentioning that we're going to come back to this quarter. There's no reason why we can't let the citizens know we got their best interest at heart now. And then if next quarter when we revisit it, if we got to make adjustments then, we could always, this thing can be flip-flop either way. Does that make sense? I think it's really important that citizens know that, and I think Lori is exactly right about our due diligence to be fiscally responsible, but I think the citizens would like to see their local leaders step up to the plate and make tough decisions to help them make ends meet, pay their bills right now. And that's just not us, that's every state all across the country. Everybody's scared. A lot of stuff going on right now. And if we're going to look at this thing quarterly, I think a better move would let our citizens know that we got their best interests in heart today. And then if we have to readjust the tax rate to go in the other direction, once we know things are getting better and back to normalcy, and we're sure that it's getting back to normalcy, we can always have a public hearing and go back the other way as well. Correct?
We will set the tax rate. We can't go up, but we can come down.
We can go up if we set a public hearing.
Not once you adopt the tax rate in a given fiscal year.
No, you can't go above what you adopt.
Okay.
And,
We can adopt here and come down.
That's right.
yeah. So if 3 months from now, we can set the tax rate today, but we can drop that tax rate 3 months from there and adjust it down on. So, we can, we can basically take care of the budget today and it still be flexible because it is a modified budget.
And Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, we can drop it 3 months from now, but we can drop it right now, here today, while we're here.
Well, yes, but we will still be limited to only going down. And if we have a disaster between now and when we get the information as to where we are, that's because this tax rate won't go into effect until
July.
December. This is 21 taxes.
Yes. The commissioner, revenue, and the treasurer will need it probably by September 1st. Usually that's when the commissioner puts the tax book out and the process starts getting going to issue those bills to citizens for the December 5th due date.
But isn't it technically speaking, the tax rate is attached to the adopted budget that commences July 1.
You're correct. Typically, when the tax rate is adopted for one fiscal year at a time, the appropriation can happen multiple
Correct.
times during the
Correct.
fiscal year.
Yeah.
But the tax rate is set once, and that's the final year. You're correct.
And you know, I want to make it clear, Mr. Mitchell, you're exactly right. I mean, I don't think there's any of us sitting around this table, we may agree to disagree on how we get there. We all care deeply about the plight of our citizens during a very unprecedented time for everyone. You know, so playing around with the tax rate right now without knowing the state, the potential state reductions, this is going to be a very fluid situation. And, you know, we're talking about to equalize this rate, which I know you're in favor of, that's going to immediately require service reductions. So, you know, that is a big question. I mean, do the citizens want us to equalize the rate and take away services? That's the bottom line question.
But using the $2 million of it to do that, I think that was my Mike's.
If you equalize the rate, the property tax is going to drop it.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct.
So we're looking at dropping, I don't think we've had any questions on the property tax rate, but if you equalize both of them, you're talking, Chris,
About $2.1 million.
At least. On the property tax.
Well, that real estate, an equalized
Mhm.
real estate tax
Because
rate.
it brings in like any 600 and some thousand, so don't take you long to figure that out. And I think, I don't know how we could really survive with equalizing both of them. Because you've got 5%, you've got 280,000, and your equalization is how much?
About 1.8 on just real estate. I think that's right. Is that about right, Brian?
1.8 million.
250 personal property, about 1.8 real estate.
Yeah, yeah. Right around 2 million, Mr. Chairman.
I'll tell you something else you think about it, talking about reducing services. If you get down to reducing services, then you gotta start reducing staff.
Sure.
And we've got some of the best people in Frank County now running this county. And I don't know how we would replace them if they went somewhere else. So like I said, you know, when you start reducing, then you start threatening. When you start threatening, then people start looking for other jobs. So I hate to see any of our county employees have to go somewhere else, especially the good staff that we got now. So, you know, there's several different ways to look at it.
Yeah, just to follow up on that statement, Tommy, that myself, Mr. Carter, we're not talking about cutting staff. We're talking about using additional fund balance to make up the difference. We
I
don't.
agree with you on that too, but we don't know what the state's gonna do.
I know.
So whatever you cut today, the state might turn around and get you twice as hard, if not 3 times hard. Then what you gonna do? So then that's when you gotta start looking at staff and vehicles, school buses, just different things it takes to keep this county going. And right now, like I said, to me, the most logical thing is to wait and see what happens in July, or August, or whatever it is.
I think the one important thing to make clear for our citizens that are watching and listening, you know, I've heard the fund balance referred to as a rainy day fund. And someone has told me that that's just been something fairly recent within the last year versus calling it a fund balance. I don't view it as a rainy day fund. And the reason is that that fund is there to maintain a guideline, a fiscal policy guideline of 20% that is going to enable us to get low percentage, if not maybe at some point 0% interest dollars into the county for things we need to do. Davenport, our financial advisors, have advised that you know, if we go into the fund balance for operating, that it could end up costing the citizens $10 million in increased interest rates because we're no longer going to be able to maintain our bond rating. That is significant. Again, I'm talking about taking the long view. You know, you can touch that money and you can say you're going to put it back, but we've touched it for operating. That's going to mean something to the fiscal responsibility that we as a county have, and how we're going to move into our future. So we have to think very, very carefully over the balance between service provision, helping our citizens, and making sure that the long view on the health of this county is taken into consideration, and that includes things that we need to do to protect and help our citizens. So I'm sure nobody envies the seats that we are sitting in, and we're going to do our best. Each and every one of us are doing our very best to bring solutions to the table. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of answers right now. So when you don't have a lot of answers, I think our default position should be to stay with where we are and let's adjust moving forward. That's just my recommendation.
Well, I have to tell you all, if you do not step up to the plate today, you're going to get a backlash from the citizens of this county, and quite frankly, I don't blame them. And I hope they're watching this today, because now is the time to step up to the plate and do our due diligence and help these people. We're maintaining a level budget. We had a huge tax increase the first year I was on the board. We raised personal property 10 cents, I think is correct. Everything was operating fine until then. We've learned how to live with this extra money. We doled out $3 million last quarter of last year. I'm sorry, folks, it's time to make some tough decisions here. And we're holding $18 million reserve in that fund balance to protect our credit rating. I cannot imagine during this kind of economy and these kinds of stresses that are put on local government, any bond agency or lending agency is going to ding this county for using $2 million when we're sitting on, what is it, 22, 23, Brian? In the fund balance, how much money we've got in there?
We're about $20 million.
Yeah.
Now, that's estimated from last fiscal year, and it does depend on how we end this fiscal year as to what that fund balance does end up being. If we do suffer a loss, that $2 million cushion goes down. But that's where we're at right now.
Well, I'm going to tell you all, I'm keeping with my position, and I'm going to be able to look every constituent in my district in the eye and tell them I tried to do everything I could to help you. And the rest of it's on you all, how you vote.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, and Sister Carter, a question from you as well. I think you guys made a great move about 2.5 months ago when you told every department to no spending except for absolutely essential items. Do we have any idea of how much rollover funds we may possibly have? You guys have just a guess?
It's so volatile, though. Main reason why is I don't have a lot of data on state sales tax or our local sales tax the state's going to give us. The extra $1 million from the pipeline contractor and personal property will help. But probably, I mean, last year we had we had a great year with $3 million. That was put in either reserves or the capital needs that had not been funded in during the budget process.
$3 million left there?
In the last fiscal year. And so that's what Mr. Carter's referencing. And that's how we doled it out over 2-3 different budget board meetings.
So we can have that again this year?
No, this year I would probably looking at breaking even. We may have some savings overall for county and schools with some of the shutdown in services. But conservatively, I would assume no surplus this year for right now until we get a little bit more information in the next 30 to 60 days.
Mr. Whitlow, can I ask you a question? Did I interrupt you?
No.
Are we anticipating that we'll be able to have that taxation with Mountain Valley Pipeline again in 2020, 2021?
Great question. It really, in revenue projections, Ms. Smith wasn't necessarily anticipating last year. Again, back to Mr. Carter, your point about, you know, the carryover from last year. And so really in the projections next year. It wasn't necessarily because the timing of the pipeline and the conclusion of the pipeline and what that may be. We know, as I understand, there are less subcontractors, in the county now. We're seeing that obviously in the drop in the sales tax. We started seeing that kind of drop off if some of that work was contributed to, subcontractors and contractors. In terms of the equipment, it all depends on January 1st, what equipment's in the county. Likely a lot of that equipment was in the county this past January 1st. It's not to say that we're going to have that same amount of equipment, the next January 1st. And so to Mr. Carter's point, this year, any of those dollars hopefully will offset any of the current losses as a result of COVID, meaning the sales, the lodging, the interest income, and so forth, to hopefully end in the black. But as we know, that's really been kind of the issue with this whole thing, is just the unknown.
Well,
because it is a 2-month delay
Yeah.
and really seeing where our revenues are. I hope that answered your question.
Sure. And I guess ancillary to my question is, am I assuming that we have not projected revenue from Mountain Valley Pipeline in this modified budget?
Correct. It is not projected.
So anything that would come in would be in excess of what we adopt,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. We did back out in the modified budget. We were seeing, as I presented in March to the board, we were seeing modest growth in personal property. We've seen really a minimal growth in real estate, about 0.5% a year really since the recession. It's not a lot to write home about. We've tried to jumpstart the county's economy and attracting more businesses and population to the county to help with that on the real estate side. But on the personal property side, there was some healthy growth in terms of cars, boats, that type of thing. Because we saw that over the last couple of years, in addition to the Mountain Valley Pipeline on business personal property. However, we recognize with COVID and the economy, we've backed out any personal property growth in the modified budget for next year, because we assume folks are not necessarily buying new vehicles and boats and so forth at this time. So,
And are we going to have any projected decrease in our debt service payments? I know some of the school debt's coming off. And I haven't looked at just, on our side of the ledger in terms of, because debt service payments, I would assume, come off the top when we're looking at expenditures.
No projected decrease. Part of the reason why is the funding in there has to also cover the refinance of the bond anticipation notes. So we've kept it level funded with what Davenport recommended when we borrowed that a couple of years ago. Plus the line of credit financing that we approved in October, November, I believe, maybe December, but that for the landfill closure is still coming due. So until we draw it down and start paying that principal back, we have level funded debt service for the next fiscal year. So to answer your question, realistically in our existing debt, no. The most significant debt service reduction for us in our debt schedule won't happen until 23-24, and that's why Davenport did the bond anticipation notes to sync that up.
So we can level fund our debt service payments from year to year?
Yes.
Really?
Well, for what we have now from the tax increase from the borrowing 2 years ago, we don't always level fund. From
Okay.
the county side, we are.
I
And
got
some
you.
of that
I
is
understand.
built into the debt fund to offset what it's gonna take to refinance that debt in a couple of years.
I understand. Thank you.
And when do we have to have a budget finalized?
By state code, Mr. Chairman, localities must adopt their budgets by June 30th of each fiscal year. Is the state code requirement.
Mr. Chairman. Have we taken into consideration, and I apologize about not understanding, since day one I've heard we can go up, we just have to have a public hearing, so I apologize if I wasn't clear on that, but have we taken into consideration all the new homes that's been built in the last year? Have we taken that into consideration as far as how much extra real estate revenue we're projected to get from all the new homes I guess it'd be based off Mr. Sandy's office as far as building permits. It seems like there's a
Right.
unbelievable amount of new homes being built in town.
Sure, Mr. Mitchell. We look at the last 2 or 3 year trends in terms of the real estate growth, and that's what I mentioned earlier. While in the mid-2000s we were seeing 6-7% real estate growth, since the recession we've only been seeing between 0.5%, maybe 1.5%. So it's fluctuated between 0.5% and 1.5%. And so we have built that growth into the revenue projections. Even at the March 17th, the initial budget, we did have that captured in the
I think
revenue.
we'll be surprised on that one. It
We
seems
hope
like in the last 12 months, you correct me if I'm wrong, it just seems like in the last 12 months, it's really set off as far as the new home. There's some neighborhoods in Lori's district that have 6 or 7 new homes in one community that are under construction. So I think we might be delightfully surprised on that one. At least I hope so.
Hope so.
I have one comment on Mountain Valley Pipeline. They're in a stalemate situation with the courts and the water crossing permits and so forth. So unless they haul all their machinery out of Franklin County, it's going to be set here January the 1st at this point, because they're locked into a non-construction phase right now, and there's nothing going on unless they just go bankrupt.
And everyone was here this January 3rd, so
All you got to do is ride down here on 220 and look at
I
it.
think we can make them. I know they can move some of it out, but not the majority of it's still here. So that'll be good.
So, Mr. Chairman, are you looking for guidance from the board on each of the tax rates before we get to
Well,
budget conclusions?
we have to set tax rates, and that's on our agenda. So I guess we're looking to set the tax rates.
So I guess that you're looking for a motion to either adopt as submitted, or if there are any, a motion that would reduce any particular taxation line. Is that what you're looking for at this point?
Well, we're supposed to, and this is our agenda, this doesn't mean we've got to do it today, but the tax rates have to be set. And we've already had the public hearing, so we're legally aware we can set the tax rates and advertise them.
Because I would say that if the board chooses to reduce any line item in taxes, the staff's going to have to go back and identify those cuts, or find that revenue and identify it and recommend it. Mr. Whitlow, I don't think we should wait until the board meeting not to give very direct guidance on the tax level.
Staff would, need guidance. As I said, whenever the tax rates are adopted, that's the corresponding revenue for the budget. And whatever that corresponding revenue is, whether it's additional, whether it's level, or whether it's decreased, we have to know that, and then get further guidance from the board in what areas the board would like us to make those adjustments.
Okay, so it is a board decision. So if we're not going to make a decision today, as I read the agenda, that's what we were here for. So if we don't do that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, you waiting on a motion?
Yes?
I'll make a motion that we adopt a tax rate of $2.41 personal property. That would be a 5% tax reduction on personal property. And do we need to vote on them separately or together?
our county attorney's not here, but I think you could put all of the rates in the same motion.
Same motion.
Okay.
And also, the real estate property rate will stay as it is right now, 61 cents, with the knowledge that we can come back in 3 months if we need to, with whatever the state does to us, up or down, and adjust that as we need to. That's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Taylor, for clarification, again, with the tax rates, 61 cents per 100 on real estate, $2.41 on personal property, assuming leaving the other rates on business personal property and machinery and tools and merchants capital the same. Just wanted that clarification in the motion.
okay. Madam Clerk, would you please read the motion?
So, on the motion made by Supervisor Tatum to adopt a tax rate of $2.41 per $100 for personal property, is that 61 cents per $100 in real estate, with the knowledge that it can be adjusted in the future, and keeping the other tax rates the same. And that was seconded by Supervisor Condit.
Okay. Do we have any more discussion?
So, when I ask a question, so on the personal property, you mentioned there will be no decrease for business, tangible and machinery?
The personal property is broken out in two different categories, Mr. Mitchell.
Right.
One's personal property, and the other, which is already at $2.46 currently, the tax levy on personal property for heavy construction machinery, and so forth, currently is $1.89 per 100.
So we're just looking at personal property,
Yeah.
not personal property for business.
Well, business tangible is part of personal, it's in the 241.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So what would it be if you did the 5 cent that Mr. Tatum was proposing for both of them? How much does that cost? Because it's $2.80.
It's about 56,000 per penny.
So
On heavy
it's
equipment.
it's over half. It's closer to 600,000.
56,000 per penny in personal property,
What about the equipment?
heavy equipment. I'm not sure on heavy equipment, we typically don't adjust that rate and track it, we have to go back and look at that.
So how do business owners want to take that over?
And they just have to come back and adjust that.
So I'm not questioning. I just thought we were just throwing it all in one basket. I didn't realize it's probably closer to 600,000 for both of them.
Well, the 5 cents of the 241 and our estimate of 280 would include both. So if you reduce personal property, including business tangible, 5 cents, that would be about $280,000.
So 280 includes the business,
That business tangible is
but
part
not
of that
heavy
rate.
machinery.
Correct.
And you don't know what the heavy machinery number is?
I don't, I'd have to get that breakdown, and get you a better per penny rate for that.
The reason I ask is usually if some of the experts are right, and we are facing recession, the businesses that have the heavy equipment, they're the first ones to go. So
It's usually a lot smaller, and the reason why we don't adjust them is our machinery and tools and our heavy equipment are just from a dollar perspective, not a big percent of the budget, so we don't track it that way. I have to research that for you.
And we can come back later and reduce those if we need to.
Okay. Y'all comfortable with the reading of the motion? Okay. All in favor of the 241 for personal property and 61 cents for real estate? All three would just say aye?
Mr. Chairman, if you're willing, I'm going to do a roll call.
Yes, ma'am.
Supervisor Mitchell,
no.
Supervisor Smith,
Yes.
Supervisor Carter,
No.
Supervisor Condit,
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum,
Yes.
Chairman Mitchell.
Yes.
And I will note that Supervisor Thompson is absent.
And just a comment on that, we need to keep Mr. Thompson and his family very much on our conscience, and she's out there. Okay, would you read the results?
Yes, and the motion passes with 4 people voting yes to that motion and 2 against.
All right. So, we've set the tax rate. Do we want to go ahead and set the modified budget as presented? Or we can do that? I would say no later than next board meeting.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. If the board, it's a pleasure to the board. If the board wishes to have a discussion, now that the tax rate has been set with that 5-cent reduction, the $280,000, staff would need direction from the board as to where to pull that out of the budget. We do have Mr. Carter and finance staff has worked if the board wants to go through that exercise here today. There are several things to consider. I understand the school budget has already been adopted. Certainly, if there were any sharing in the reduction of revenue with the school system, that is a point that the board may wish to deliberate and consider. If there are other areas in the county budget that the board would not wish to go towards to find those dollars, that would be helpful. If there are other things to make up the difference in the reduction of the revenue from the personal property tax decrease, as an example, if there are user fees, as an example, tipping fees at the landfill, overdue book library fees, as another example, youth athletic fees. So if there are revenue reductions from one and revenue increases in another, that's one way that you can look at making up the $280,000. If that's shared with other departments, shared with our school system, I think we would need to discuss that and what that amount would be. And of course, finance staff has that process built today and can lead the board through that exercise if the board wishes to go through that. I think Mr. Carter think you have that available and ready. And if there are other areas of reductions in the county budget that we can look at, I think staff put together some examples to assist the board. As an example, we offer funds to external agencies. If there's a reduction to external agencies, this board funds the things like capital. Mr. Carter mentioned capital. If we did not necessarily want to take this from the operation side of things, we can look at reduction in capital. We are level funded. The modified budget now is level funded capital, but if there's a $280,000 deduction, there are some things that we can go and look at the capital. So staff has worked really hard, not only anticipating the discussion with the board today, but also knowing that we'll likely have these discussions again. It could be this fall and certainly the next budget season because of the state of Virginia's economy. So, Mr. Chairman, that's yours and the pleasure of the board. We can work through that this evening if the board's ready. We can get to a conclusion. That certainly.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Whitlow, does the modified budget include the invoicing that we will begin doing on CSA?
Yes, Ms. Smith, to a point. The school budget that was adopted by the board a couple of weeks ago at your May meeting included $428,000 to go to private education day placements. Currently, we're projecting in the current year of that local cost of about $600,000. So it does fall short, give or take, around $140,000, $150,000. That money, of course, last year we began setting aside on the school system side, $190,000 in the current year budget. In the proposed budget, we've added another 238, so it's around $438,000 in that. Certainly, as an incentive for the school system in terms of accountability for the private education day placement programs, many localities, as we've discussed, share those costs with the school system. Many school systems in Virginia now fund those costs themselves, and so we've been working towards that, not in an effort to certainly hurt the school system budget in any way. That's why we've set aside those dollars last year, and then again we're setting aside the dollars at next year. But it does fall short to the tune, I think Brian and I looked at it in the current fiscal year, Mr. Carter.
About $140,000 from what we have set aside in our reserve now to what we're projecting our local portion of that cost will be.
So beginning July 1st, we will be submitting invoices to the school system for the private education day placement cost. As we said, $428,000 currently in the modified budget, potentially a shortage of $140,000 in that. If next year, if private education day placements, if it's the same amount of cost in the current fiscal year, the school system would need to come up with another $140,000. If that were the case, that would shift to their side of the budget.
Thank you.
I have one question. You mentioned the different fees that we have. Some of those, enlighten us, I know the tipping fee at the landfill, different user fees that charge in other places. What kind of money are we talking about if we raise some of those? Sure.
Yeah, good question. I'm going off the top of my head, but we may want to pull up the data, Mr. Carter. But as an example, for landfill tipping fees, currently, and Mr. Smith is with us, currently our landfill tipping fee is $43 per ton, which is very competitive in the region. Certainly it's not the highest by no means. And Mr. Smith probably has a better handle on the market than that. But as an example, raising the landfill tipping fees from $43 to $45 for the users would generate, I think we looked at this, Ms. Wagner, Mr. Carter, I think it was around $40,000 of additional revenue, if that were the case.
So basic.
Let me ask, is that the tipping fee at the landfill, is that the same for county residents and maybe contractors from county residents or through? Well, county's free, that's contractors and
That's commercial.
Okay.
County residents are already covered
Right.
through their normal
Taxes.
revenues, taxes, but that's specifically for private sector.
So if we raise the tipping fee to $50,
I just did the math, $14 would cover the $280,000, if I'm not mistaken.
that's one area. In my opinion, a tipping fee is a user fee, and that's sort of like your meals tax. They're fair tax. People who use the most, they want to pay the most. And most of those contractors that have to pay that, they're going to turn that price right around on their customers. But at the end of the day, it's coming from somewhere. It's going to come from people in Franklin County ultimately.
What is the average tipping fee?
Yeah.
Bedford is 41, but they charge for all their building materials and things like that. The resident building materials here is free. Pennsylvania County is 41, but they're looking at some other things. Pennsylvania County has $120 garbage tax on all the households.
Right.
Henry County is a little weird. They pay $63 a ton because their trash has to go to North Carolina. A resident can get rid of his bagged household stuff at their 6 collection sites But anything else, brush, tires, building materials have to go to the transfer station at $60-some a ton. Well, no, if you have anything beyond your pickup stuff there, have to take it to the transfer station at $63 a ton. It's hard to get apples to apples because they do charge, but Bedford does not allow any building material or brush, except that they'll take brush on a specific month, like in April. But all the building materials have to go to the landfill. You have to have a sticker to use the landfill, and you have to pay. And that's a huge chunk of our waste chunk.
What do you think Ms. Tatum's,
It's like basically for every dollar we went up, it's $20,000 to $22,000, depending on how busy things are. I view it looking like concrete. People used to shop around for concrete prices and they go, oh, it's $1 cheaper over here, but when you're only getting 10 yards of concrete, it's not big. Where I think it will be a major effect is on industries like Carolades,
right,
Fly Gym,
he uses
those places, uttermost.
Fleetwood?
It could be fairly significant. I don't think it's something that we can do, just put up a sign up next week and say we've gone up $2. I think we would have to give them a window and give them a chance to adjust for what goes on with theirs, especially the haulers like Franklin Container, First Piedmont, those guys that have a contract locked in, they've got to have a little bit of time to make an adjustment. Normally they call me the first of the year and go, do you think you guys are going to hold your prices? And we're not obligated to, but that's the way they base some of their stuff.
What do you think about $45 then?
Oh,
You're talking about going up $2 a ton. And like you said, you got several people that in the business of hauling.
correct,
And you got also go look at, they bring income in Frank County too.
correct.
So,
It's going to generate the $40,000 to $45,000. The landfill as a whole, right now we're doing well. I mean, we're getting a lot of trash, but since we've gone to some collection sites, our chargeable is up significantly.
you see a problem with 45?
No, I do not. I
Okay.
do not. I think that's doable.
Is that doable if you, Ms. Taylor?
Well, one thing, your local contractors are going to keep using the garbage boxes. And as you raise the fees, you're going to raise more going into the garbage boxes than normal because they're having to pay more. Yeah. I know from where I live, there's a lot of small contractors that are using almost every day. So I don't know whether it's a flip. I'm not against raising by any means, but just the thought as you raise it, you're going to pick up more.
Well,
for the locals.
to be honest with you, if you're a legal contractor, you're going to obey the rules. And the people that's using the dumpsters now are going to use the dumpsters if you reduce it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the point I'm at, is that, we don't need to go up excessive, but we also need to generate money, and we also need to take care of our people that's in Franklin County. And I think, because they are due diligent about calling you when the price is gonna go up or whatever, and I can see giving them a while to take, but I see nothing wrong on 45, but like I said, the people using the dumpsters now are gonna use them, whether you reduce it or raise it more, so I think 45 is a good figure.
Are you good?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Carter, Ms. Brian Carter is pulling up that exact amount.
$45,000.
$45. $2.45 Councilman.
Mr. Chairman, are we gonna look at any proposed areas, as Mr. Whitlow has said? Are we prepared to do that this evening?
I hope so, because I think, realistically, we need to be prepared to vote the budget at our next board meeting. And that'll give them a couple of weeks if we can give them some head starts to where to work.
I think it's only fair because staff has done a tremendous job getting to this point. And the board, you know, again, it's part of our due diligence and rolling our sleeves up. If we're going to suggest cuts, we need to be part of identifying where.
Okay, we're open for discussion on it. And I think staff can.
And Mr. Chairman, if it's helpful to the board, you know, staff has built an analysis to get there. So, you know, if the board is agreeable on things such as an example, with landfill tipping fee, you know, then 45,000 comes off the 280. If the board's agreeable to anything above the 428, up to a maximum of 140,000 for CSA shared costs with the schools, that comes off the 280 as an example. And then we have several examples in several areas that may be helpful to the board if you want us to pull that up and share that, and of course Mr. Carter has it on his screen as well. So.
Yes. And Chris shared with me earlier, they did have this prepared if we wanted to listen. And so I think
Can we take 5?
yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
This may take a long time.
Yeah, so
Everybody jumps on that. That's my comment.
Yes.
Can I have y'all's attention?
I'd like to make a nomination for the Fairham Water and Sewer Authority. Asked Mr. Whitlow if this would be appropriate. He said, as long as you said I could, I could. I'd like to nominate Don Smith to the Fairham Water and Sewer Authority.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I understand this was not an agenda item, but this is a matter that's come to our attention. The county current representative on the Fairham Water and Sewer Authority is our Public Works project manager, Charlie Catlett. And of course, Charlie is soon retiring and not able to fulfill his duties as the county representative on the Fairham Water and Sewer Authority. And the Water Authority would like a county representative. In the past, it's always been someone from Public Works. I know it's not on the agenda today, but I understand from Mr. Smith it's time sensitive, and so he approached Mr. Tatum, and again, that's the pleasure of the board.
And I do make that in form of motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, that Don Smith be added to the Fairham Water Authority. And, is there any discussion? If not, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Well, you're dealing with
Today is your day.
I'm glad you're here.
and you'll be able to vote, man.
What else you need today? You on the roll?
Chris, if we could go ahead and, look at,
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask Brian if he could maybe walk the board through this exercise, and again, appreciation to the finance staff. We did something similar during the recession, and it was helpful then, and certainly now we're in another economic climate. Looking at both on the left side, you'll see revenue reductions or increases. We've obviously added the 5 penny reduction there, and you'll when you do that, that comes to $280,000. And of course, we on the corresponding slide, of course, we've added back then to increase landfill tipping fees of $45,000. So that reduced it from $280. Now we're at $235. And of course, I think Ms. Smith, you had some discussion about the CSA private day reimbursement fees. If the $280,000 personal property reduction, I guess, is shared with our school system, that's essentially $140,000 and so forth. So and that is assuming that private day placements are going to require an additional another $140,000 next year, and if it's not, then that's the benefit of not having that. So again, that's the pleasure of the board, but if the board went along, whatever the consensus is in that and sharing that cost, that would reduce the 235 by the 140, and then you would be looking for whatever that equates to. And this is just an example. Again, this is all the pleasure of the board. This is just, and you will see it now. Now we're at a deficit, again, needing to identify $94,000. I will say that this is a user fee increase and a shared cost to the school system. If the board is looking to not necessarily reduce hours, because you'll see on the right side several things that we can go. You can see reducing the scholarship program at Virginia Western, eliminating brush boxes. These are all service reductions in terms of our operations. The EMT program at the high school, again, we're not advocating any of this. These are all examples. We can come up with many, many more. This just shows you how actually balancing works. That being said, if the board does not have an appetite, again, for any further reductions in operations, we can look at capital. Right now, the modified budget proposed is a level funded capital at $2 million. We can reduce that by $94,541. I don't necessarily think that would put the county in a bad position per se, although I think you all have heard me prior to COVID, we've been funding capital at the same amount for 15 years. And so originally we were going to try to add $200,000 on the county side, and then also, I know our school superintendent's with us, we were going to try to do that on the school side. Of course, now with COVID, we're not able to do that. That being said, Mr. Carter and his staff has went back and looked at the capital budget if it was a reduction of 90-some thousand, Brian, I guess, where would you go? I guess you've put some pen to paper with that as well.
Yeah, pull that spreadsheet.
Well, I mean, before you move that slide, what are the things we're not seeing on the bottom? Does that list
Sure.
continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we should pull that down.
And these are just, Ms. Smith and members of the board, these are, let me just say, these are just examples. When we're talking about looking at millions of dollars in revenue reductions, we obviously are talking about millions of dollars in expenditure cuts. As I said previously, a lot of the paper clips, the scissors, the paper, the utilities, the fuel, significantly 400,000 or so of that has been cut. In addition to the $3 million that we cut out, or part of the $3 million rather that we cut out. Anything beyond that really has to get deeper into the bone of the organization. And that would be things like potentially closing the landfill on Sundays, closing collection sites, possibly decreasing the service areas at our fire EMS stations. Again, staff is not advocating this. This is just an exercise if and when that time comes, if it comes, hopefully not, that we have to look at significant revenue reductions, take significant expenditure cuts. I mean, it's to balance, that's what it takes. So, Ms. Smith, I hope this, and this is not all encompassing, there's many creative ways that we can go about this. This is just some examples.
No question. I don't have a best insight in the world. You need to give us copies of that. So in case it does happen, we'll have it in our minds what we can do.
We can share that with you, Mr. Cundiff, and the board.
I appreciate
That would
that.
likely be helpful, I think, to the board.
Would it be helpful, Mr. Chairman, if we just kind of go and decide what we can live with in terms of potential reductions that are on that list? How do you want to do this?
I
Scroll back
really
up.
at the moment, you know, it's hard to pick out one thing.
Yeah, I just, Mr. Chairman, if I may, one thing that jumped out at me is to reduce the break, let's see, you went too far, go back down. Sorry. Okay, reduce the library hours for, at the Main and Westlake, 1 day per week. That's something, I could live with that reduction over a lot of these others.
Tim, we're trying to find the 280 right now, right? Is that what we're doing?
Well,
Yeah.
potentially,
More or less.
if I may, Mr. Chairman, potentially, if you can go back, potentially where you are, if the board has agreed on tipping fees, that's $45,000. If the board has agreed, again, on sharing another sharing $140,000 in CSA education costs with the schools, essentially half of the revenue reduction, you're now looking for $94,500.
The one thing that I don't like at all on the list is eliminating the tax relief for the elderly and handicapped.
Sure.
I can't live with that, eliminating that.
And again, let me just preface this to the board. These are not staff recommendations. This was done, again, in the height of the recession. It's been updated.
If looking, I'm beating a dead horse, but looking at the library, if instead of closing them both down for a full day, what if you went to a half a day, like on Wednesday or something? Is there a compromise to where you could get to the number we need to be and not lose those services completely for that? I mean, a lot of people, you know, rely on the library for internet and whatnot, but
How about if you rotate it?
we'll just close one.
Plug one down. Yeah. That way somebody's got to have something, because see, if you do a half a day, and it's a good thought, don't get me wrong, but if you do a half a day, then you gotta bring people in, you gotta pay the expense, you gotta turn the lights on, you gotta do all this stuff. And I think if you rotate them, if somebody's got to have something from the library, library, then they got a library open about travel broke. But, you know.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I know our library director is here. Mr. Tatum, to answer your question, I'm not into the details as much of the operation. I will say that initially the library hours have been modified already to target more of the busy times when the library is busy from the patrons. And Ms. Berry has a lot of data that she's been able to collect over the last few years of showing the busy times of when the library is utilized the most. That's been very helpful for her. And so in a sense, the library hours have been modified and adjusted on a couple of occasions, I believe, Ms. Berry, to make up for that.
If I could just say, we get money from the Library of Virginia. It's our state aid. We have to meet certain requirements in order to get that. One of the requirements, we more than meet them. So one of the things I was looking at in preparation of this is we are currently open 3 nights a week after 5, meaning until 8. We could certainly, that's something we've entertained before, if we at least stayed open one night, because we want to be able to serve people who work all day or kids are at school or whatever. But even if so let's say we cut 2 of those nights, 1 from each branch, that's 6 hours right there. I know it's not huge, but I mean, we'd be getting there.
Do you know what that number is, Alan?
I don't. I think if we're looking at, well, it's in Rocky Mountain, a county-owned building, so we have that, but we do pay rent in Wesley, so we pay that no matter what if we're open or closed. But we have 4 staff total that come in at that, so I mean, it would be not a huge savings, but it would be, it would definitely be something.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have we?
Smith, closing the landfill on Sunday, what would that do to your operation?
It'd be a disaster on Monday with all the unmanned sites.
Well, that was kind of what I wanted you to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I would think that even the manned sites, once they were full, they just have to lock the gate up. Until we have complete all manned sites where we've got complete control, that's not a viable option. Our cleanup fees would eat up a big chunk of that.
Thank you. Anyone else have
Did we agree to, as a board, to hold public safety on this? Like all of, there's some reductions by station up here, by district. Are we still agreeing to that? To holding that public safety harmless?
Yes.
That's what I would like to see.
Yeah. I don't want to touch anything with public safety, and I don't want to touch the sheriff's department.
Yeah, I agree.
Everything that's going on.
I agree.
Everything they get right now, right? Yes.
I totally agree. That's why I asked. I wanted to make sure that we were talking about public safety.
that fits in with Mr. Smith's comment.
Yes, sir.
We've got places that we don't want to go, and as staff works on this, to understand, how they're looking at it also.
So we're still in discussion about passing this budget June 16th, correct?
Or this evening. I mean, if it's the pleasure of the board, if the board gets to a balance, from, if we're at 95,000, if you get to balance in some direction from staff, I think we're there, but again, that's the pleasure of the board. I don't want to push the board or leave the board. I will say, again, capital, if the board's not looking to do any hour of service reductions on the operating side, we can look at capital in terms of,
There's two, you said 2 million in there?
2 million is approximately 2 million in our annual capital, and so it would be reduced by, if this is the pleasure of the board, it would be reduced by 95,000. And there are a few things, we just delay the purchase of cars or equipment for a couple of years, and I think you took a look at that, Brian, earlier, and we can share some, where we would go with that, if the board wants us to look at that.
When you say cars, what department are you referring to?
Not necessarily law enforcement and public safety, because if I hear what you're saying in terms of the hold of harmless, but there are some in our fleet that we can delay a year.
I think so too.
And
That is, I mean, this is just me talking, we're having a discussion. Go from 2 million to 1.9 to make up the 280, I think is I don't know why we, well, that's a no-brainer if you ask me.
I have no problem with it either, but I think before, we would need to see where the reduction would be as to what we would be taking out. And we look at this primarily as keeping our buildings as status quo. And so personally, I would like to see where we're.
okay. Mr. Carter, do you have that schedule? We can pull that up, and there's several areas in the capital budget, I think, that we scrub that we think we can go back to and not put us in a compromised position.
I would really just generally speaking, I don't want to put service reductions in play at this point. I think we have some limited options.
Brian, if you could maybe, pull up the top one, not the bottom one. Is that your top one, Brian, there?
Well, the top one is
Yeah.
the first 200, which
Yeah.
is done. This would be the 2.2 million that's funded in the modified budget now, and things that aren't required. So down here is where I mentioned we have to do landfill compliance, we have to do certain IT licensing, we have to do fire apparatus. So this right here is the area where staff would look for cuts.
What I will say in some of the capital cuts, as an example for the information technology PC replacement, as an example, we are aware, as the board knows, the localities, and we now have I guess from the federal government, the CARES Act dollars, the stimulus dollars for the localities. As staff has shared, there are stringent restrictions on CARES Act funding. It can't be used to supplant the budget. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this meeting today. We would have been done and everyone would have been walked away because we could have used that to supplant the revenue losses. What the stringent requirements are on the CARES Act, and Mr. Carter and Mr. Burnett and Mr. Harrison actually specifically have been working on a lot of this over the last couple of weeks, Mr. Ferguson. You can use it on things like PPE, personal protective equipment. We will get reimbursed for a lot of those. A lot of that is one-time dollars, not necessarily ongoing expenses. But there is a provision within the CARES Act that does provide, as an example, to promote exactly what we're doing here in terms of our technology, for boards of supervisors to be able to meet remotely, for county staff to have new computers with webcams, etc. And so Mr. Harrison and his staff have done an excellent job of putting, I guess, a Christmas list together for the stimulus package for a lot of those items. Some of those items are actually PC replacement. And so if we were to go for a reduction in the capital, you can see this PC replacement here is a likely, perhaps good area to go to, and I'm not trying to, Mr. Harrison's agreeing with me, I'm not trying to pick on him per se, but if we can get those dollars and even more from the federal stimulus package, that helps us utilize what we had budgeted in our capital, and that would bridge the gap for this 95,000.
Any more discussion? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I'm sure you are tired of me getting this horse, but I'm gonna beat it one more time. This fiscal year is gonna be over very soon. I would like for the board to still consider what I brought up the last 3 or 4 meetings, well, last 2 about that 50,000. If at the end of this month, if the contingency fund still has 63,000, I would beg you guys to consider giving each volunteer fire department in the county an extra $5,000 from them losing funds from their fundraisers during this pandemic. I don't know if we have to vote on that, but it really doesn't pertain to this budget. But if we're having comments and we're ending this budget year, the money's left over. Let's show the volunteers that we do love them and care for them, that we appreciate what they're doing all day, all night. I talked to some of the Rocky Mountain Fire Department members. They had their busiest month ever on record this past month. But just because there's a pandemic and things are shut down doesn't mean that these firefighters and EMS providers aren't out there giving us 100%. And I'm glad that it's music to my ears that we just had a general consensus that we will no cuts to public safety. And I thank y'all for that. Because I know what these men and women are doing. I tell them, we've been there firsthand. And I'd really like to consider the leftover contingency fund to help our volunteers out.
I agree with Mr. Mitchell on that, and if the money is there, being that this is right now not a budget increase, it's a one-time increase to help them just one time because of lost money due to not being able to have fundraising. If the money is available, I would like to see that 50,000 utilized as well for our fire departments.
And if we can squeeze a little bit more, our agencies outside of the county, the fire boats, I know we've got a lot of discussion on the Cool Branch coming up in Hardy, but I'd love for us to consider them as well. With everything going on with the lake, I know the fire boats have been putting an awful amount of time on that lake with the flooding. And as the lake gets busy, it's been warm, and a lot of kayak and canoe rescues, and we've even had some body recoveries. So I want to make sure we don't forget about them either. But I would really like to, at minimum, the 50,000. I appreciate that, Tim, just to show them that we do care and just give us a little extra, just to soften the blow of not being able to fundraise, because we depend on that fundraising to make things meet, and we've lost it. So.
Not being an advocate, but do the rescue squads, we're not considering them?
Well, Billy, how many do we have that are running calls right now? We got Callaway,
We have followed it.
Scruggs.
Red Valley, and Glade Hill is kind of coming back, so we have followed.
So I appreciate that, Lee, and I have no problem with, there's 63, let's divide it up 14 ways. I mean,
Ever how we can do the most help.
Should we wait?
I don't think we
have
can.
a discussion. I mean, we've got to do some things on the lake with Pennsylvania County, and
well, that's why I said if.
I like it.
So I'm talking about, and thank you, but we do have some volunteer squads that are still operating. I know we got Callaway, we got Scruggs, we got Red Valley, and Glade Hill has started running again, correct? So
Snow Creek is running weekend.
And Snow Creek is helping out when they can, yes, sir.
And, we've got to support them. I'm not,
thank you.
but I would highly think that we would be wise to keep ourselves open. We can revisit this during the year and see where we're at.
Well, I'm not asking for new money. I'm asking for money that is just going to be left over from the contingency fund. It's $63,000 right now. So I'm not right. I think I was right, yeah. I'm not asking for new money, I'm just saying, Brian doesn't see himself having to use it for to balance budgets. I think we could spend it in a better place than with our volunteer agencies.
But the only problem with that is if we have a major breakdown, where's the major money gonna come from? Where's our three trucks, like three trash trucks got caught on fire the other year? Where's that money gonna come from? But like I said, God bless them, wonderful people, best people, they give you life for you. There ain't no doubt in my mind about it. But like I said, we need to hold off until we see what the state's gonna do. If we take all our money out of contingency fund or any other fund that we have, and the state turns around and tears us up, then what we gonna do? I mean, what do we pay now on what do we furnish volunteers now?
21 grand a year.
21,000 a year, and then of course, you know, we take the fuel, utilities, raise and start buying SCBA for fire departments. I'd have to go back and look at utilities, fuel, the insurance, workman's comp, accident health.
Now, we're probably the only one of the counties that pays workman's comp, right?
That is correct.
Right. I'm not dismissing you, by no means, don't think I am. Because my area, I'm not knocking nobody else's area, we got one of the best volunteer fire departments. But then nobody else, don't get me wrong either, on that part. But I would like for us to hold off, it's just my opinion, it's time to speak. I think we need to hold off until we find out for sure what the state's gonna do.
We can give it to them now or give it to them later, because they're not gonna make ends meet without having a fundraising money.
Well, I'm sure they gotta go to where's the person to go to.
He's not gonna have the money either.
Huh?
He's not gonna have the money either.
What? Okay, but if he doesn't have money, how we gonna have money? What we gonna do if something breaks down?
Brian, what's in the next year's budget as far as contingency fund?
The board's contingency has about 45,000 left. There was 100, we pulled out 55 for the school resource officers. We also still have the unresolved matter of the COPSIN program, so that could reduce it another 15, so there'll be 30,000 left in board contingency for next fiscal year's budget.
And that's next fiscal year's budget, but we still have right now approximately 63,000 on this year's.
Correct. Correct.
So that's what we're talking, that's what Ronnie's talking about pulling from, is what we have this year, that as of June 30th of this year will be on last year's budget.
And you have time to make that decision. We hold the prior year open through the end of August. So if we don't want to do that today, we can see how the end of the year end comes as the revenues come in June, July, August, and still give that money to the volunteers. It doesn't delay that decision.
And no offense to you, Brian, but for the last 3 months that I've been talking about this, it always ends with, we don't have to do it today. We can talk about it next month. I'm getting tired of talking about it. They're not gonna make ends meet, guys, I'm telling you. How much did Henry lose, 8 grand?
We lost 8 grand.
Callaway's probably lost, we usually, after we pay for all the food and we cook for 2 days straight, we might clear $7,000. That's a lot of money, and I'm only asking for 5. So it's still not enough, but I think they'll make it work. I know they can make it work.
Put in the form of a motion, I'll second it.
Well, we need to, COPSINC, I think, is something we probably don't want to drop. And Dr. Church is, I think you're in agreement that we probably don't want to drop COPSINC.
It comes down to cutting my budget somewhere else. COPSINC's a good program, but
But now cops, just to chime in, that's something that we can wait. As we said in the April meeting, everybody said, let's wait and see what the state and federal money does. That's something we can truly wait to see what the state and federal is. And if we've got to find $15,000 elsewhere, I think we can do it. Right?
In that call this morning I was on with Charlie Poindexter was on it. He said something that I was a little bit surprised with, and of course it's conjecture at this point, but he stated that as of today, he doesn't expect that there's going to be a cut in local aid to localities. And that was very interesting to me.
You don't think there will be a?
Yeah, indirect aid to localities. Now, that doesn't mean constitutional officers and schools and so forth. So who knows? I mean, we know what kind of shortfall the state's going to have, but I don't think we can afford, in terms of dealing with the contingency monies that we have set in there this year, that's another issue. But I think we got to be careful.
I'm sorry. Mr. Mitchell was asking.
I'm sorry, I can do it. I think I'm getting ready.
If you want to put a motion on the floor.
He wants to get done with the budget,
Oh, okay.
and then I'll put a motion on.
Well, I think the discussion was, Mr. Chairman, I know we're talking about next year's modified budget first, and if there's consensus with the board to get this modified budget adopted, it'd be in the pleasure of the board as a first step, and then it's the pleasure of the board thereafter if they want to talk about the contingency they're left over for 1920. But again, that's the pleasure of the board. I'm sorry.
I'll make one more comment. The broadband deployment suggested reduction, I don't support.
Right.
I think that, these things are so risk adverse. We need to catch up.
Yeah.
And so I don't support that.
Right. So again, Mr. Chairman, with the capital, I think, as we left it, talking with the information technology reductions, again, knowing that we're going to receive CARES Act dollars, or likely receive, we don't know to the birds in the hand, let me predicate that on the record, but we likely, from everything we gather, I'm looking at Mr. Burnett, Mr. Carter, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Ferguson, who's on that team, we feel pretty strongly that we can get a lot of our technology that normally would have been on the capital plan funded through the CARES Act, and that frees up a reduction in capital to bridge that gap of that $95,000 if that's where the board wants to go. And again, that's assuming, and again, that you want to share the cost of the revenue reduction with the school system. $280,000. That's the 5 pennies reduction on personal property. That's $140,000. That's assuming, and it may not pan out. I know our superintendent's here. And this is likely new to him, and he has this mask, so he's probably making mean faces at me right now. The reality of it is, it could be where those CSA costs are not needed because the school system, as we've been working with them over the last couple of years, have worked hard and continue to work hard on reducing the day placement cost. And we've worked hard to bring additional dollars to the school system to help cover those costs. We're just saying that a continued cost share, and again, that's the pleasure of the board. That's the one area, I think, whatever the consensus, Mr. Chairman, is on the fees with the landfill tipping fees. And then, again, I need to step away and I don't want to be leading this discussion. So,
Well, here's an issue with fees, and this is an example. Or, we've adopted a 5-cent reduction in personal property, but yet we're going to increase tipping fees. So people like Mr. Mitchell, as an example, that has a business, we're reducing, but then we're coming in and we're increasing tipping fees. So we're giving and we're taking, so that's problematic to me.
Or not giving and then taking.
Sure.
I have no, as a business owner, there's no break on the machinery side,
Yeah.
but for Piedmont, empties my dumpster probably twice a week.
I'm
That's
saying-
fine. I understand,
Yeah.
cost of doing business, I'm fine with it, but,
I'm just saying-
they're struggling, Lord is right.
Well,
Every dollar can count.
there is a perception there, and it's
Here again,
correct.
business owners going to pass that on to the customer, which is Franklin County taxpayers.
That's right.
Ultimately,
That's right. So,
It's a circle.
it is. It's a vicious circle. And that's why when I said, let's not look at service reductions, that's going to have a trickle-down effect. reducing fees.
So really, if the CARES Act, correct me if I'm wrong, if we're able to use that to pay for his stuff, really, we're only looking for 50,000. Did I understand that correctly?
Well,
That was 40, right? We're looking at 95, so 55,000.
I have to like, it would depend on how
yeah,
much.
depending how much the CARES Act, yeah.
Refreshment, yeah.
And then maybe the CARES Act gives Director Ferguson some of his funds back that he spent. So I mean, they're right?
Right, and they're really one-time dollars, for masks and things like that. They're not for ongoing expenses. I mean, it will help replenish, but it would be a one-time windfall in. But to answer your question, Mr. Mitchell, and of course, Mr. Harrison, he can probably speak better to his capital needs, but we're pretty confident that we can get quite a bit of IT capital equipment, as noted there.
But no guarantees.
No, no guarantees, but we do understand a high probability for the IT, some of the IT matters.
We repair some of the equipment in the boardroom, the intercom systems and so forth.
Yes, sir, we're looking at that. That's part of the wish list. It's part of the wish list, and in addition to have permanent audio-visual equipment whereby it would actually help on the operational side to make the operations more easy and not necessarily tie up a lot of the IT staff to have permanent audio-visual equipment, and whether it's this room or conference rooms, not only for the Board of Supervisors, but for county staff. And of course, as part of the budget, part of the InterGov upgrade, I know our building officials here, Mr. Sandy was here earlier, that specifically helps the contractors in the field to be able to schedule their inspections, get their COs and so forth. The CARES Act specifically ties to things like that allows the government to continue to operate. And so when we can make that connection, the greater likelihood, I believe, Mr. Burnett, we can get funded for it.
Correct.
All right, do we want to act on the budget today, or do we not?
Are we satisfied with the breakdown of how we were covering that, was it $94,000 gap? Will you review that, Mr. Whitlow?
Sure.
Or the expenditure lines.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
Ms. Fuller?
And again, this is assuming, of course, we know the 5 pennies, the $280,000. This is assuming that the board would share that reduction in revenue with our school system to the tune of approximately $140,459 for CSA. Again, that's a projection. If those expenses don't incur, then it's really a wash. The school system's to the good, we're to the good. And then the landfill tipping fee increase of a couple of dollars, that gets us to the it gets us to the $94,541. And then Matthew, if you'll go down further, I think it's right to the bottom, and you can see where's capital, where it says reduce capital. There, Matthew. Yes, if you type in right there on the 200,000. Well, you can exit, but if you actually type in the 94,000, you'll see it balanced to zero, or whatever that number was.
So capital, landfill tipping fee, sharing of CSA are the three things.
Yes.
I think there's something I can mention that would really help. Talking to Director Ferguson, y'all know I'm a huge proponent of fire and EMS. The high school EMT program, how successful is that right now, Director Ferguson?
Not very as far as putting people into the volunteer system.
Okay. That being said, there's 30 grand that I would support taking out of fire and EMS to help with what we're dealing with. And on top of that, I would go as far as say, with paramedic Newman that was teaching the class, I would propose there's an extra paramedic for Director Ferguson around the truck, but some of the stuff that the paramedic, I probably shouldn't be using kind of, the instructor of the EMT class also helps with Con Ed. Well, we have a training officer, is that his title?
You mean Eric?
Pat.
Pat is fire training coordinator. Eric is
Fire training, from what I understand, the fire training coordinator can take one class, and he can do the EMT Con Ed. So there's really good useful way to use those two in the office. The EMT class, there's 30 grand. He could have an extra paramedic to help with 1, 2. Maybe he could find somebody to, maybe a volunteer to help step up. I guess we can talk about that later, but
If you're talking about 30 grand, can be
there's
identified.
30 grand that I would support cutting out of the fire and EMS world for a system that is not successful from what I hear. If it was successful, our EMS volunteer agencies probably wouldn't have such a problem recruiting volunteers right now.
Well, it's just an avenue that they have to get the EMT class locally through the high school, but we're not recouping a lot of, we're not bringing a lot of them into our system. A lot of them's going, using as college applications, go to colleges, as far as PA school, nursing schools. We're just not bringing in a lot of volunteers from the program.
What is, I'm sorry.
But if someone wants to join a squad, say someone wants to join the Glade Hill Rescue Squad, the squad can pay for that class out of their funds if they want to get an EMT class and actually truly volunteer, correct?
Well, there's minimum level that they have. It's just not 1 or 2 people could take the class. It's the minimum. I think you got to have 12 folks to be able to go into it. It'd be at night, and you have to have an instructor that will willing. That instructor can charge whatever he wants to do the class.
There's 30 grand guys that I would support cutting for something that I don't think is providing much benefit to our county right now.
Well, what was the number on the tipping fee increase?
I think that's included in the
If we
I know, what was that
30
number?
out, you could reduce the
That's-
increase that we did on the tipping
That's
fee
what my thinking is.
and not have to hit so hard at the landfill. That would help.
That's my thinking. If we got, what was the tipping fee reduction?
45, it's 22,000, sorry, 500 per dollar.
Laser.
It's
$1?
It's 22,500 per dollar increase in the tipping fee on the landfill
So you're looking at 45,000
for $2.
for $2. So if we throw 30,000 at that, we could split that to just one, right? Close.
Yeah.
I would be in favor of doing that.
I would too.
I would think, just to comment on that, I would think that August 1st would be the earliest that we could implement that. Maybe even September, so you're gonna lose 2 months of that revenue on this year. So that's not a big number, but still several $1,000.
It should balance out.
Mr. Chairman, spoke with Director Ferguson during the break. He brought to my attention some extra fees that they could do on the public safety side that could help us right now. Adoption fee could go up, correct me if I misspeak, Billy. Adoption fee, you can
Talking about
generate,
animal shelter,
yes,
what is it now?
25 to 35,
If it goes 35, yes.
and that would generate $1,750.
Based on past year's data, yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily suggesting anything. I'm still Director first time bringing this up to the board. Let's see. The boarding rate, take it to $875, correct, Director Ferguson?
No, I think 75 now. There's a couple examples there where it goes, I
Okay.
think 10 and 12, I believe it is.
So if it goes to 10, based on 200 days, 200 days at 875 be 1750. 200 days at 10 and or 12, you can have an increase. You go from 1750 to 2000 to 2400. I know it's not a lot, but he did work on this to try to bring something to the meeting today. I want to make sure that maybe I
Every drop of water feeds the ocean.
So, and, Director Ferguson mentioned blasting fees. Currently, we don't charge anything for blasting fees. If I'm not mistaken, Director Ferguson, you said that when we do an inspection, I'm kind of on the fence on this one because it's more for the business to pay, but you only charge for going out once, but there's sometimes you have your fire marshals that go out 4, 5, 6 times to the same location. Is that
We don't
true?
charge at all for inspection.
You don't charge at all? for
Right,
inspection?
if we go in and do an inspection, it's a violation, we write a notice of violation, and then we have to follow up on that within 30 days.
Do other localities charge for inspection?
Most localities do.
You know what those fees might be?
They range from, I think, I'll have to go back and look, but I think they range from 25 to a couple hundred.
Okay. So, what else am I missing? I know you brought up some other days. You had the blasting.
Well,
inspection.
there's a whole gamut of fees through the fire marshal's office that we could charge for. You can pick and choose of those. You got blasting, you got fireworks, you've got, pallet storage, you've got, it's probably a couple of hundred, and you can pick and choose which ones you want. I'll be glad to get those to you sometime to discuss it, whenever. And there's different ways they do, some do them per permit, some bundle them. For example, you've got a garage, it has tire storage, it has welding, and that has materials, that's 3 permits, but most places would consider that as 1 permit, and bundle that, charging one price, because every garage would have that, so, but I can get those to you, certainly.
I think you're aware of that on social insurance.
Matthew, if you could go back to the top. You need to refresh if you.
Was it the capital?
Yeah, you need 94,541, if you could put that in the capital. Yeah, 94,541, and then check the box and hit refresh. Okay, there you go. So, Ms. Smith, to your question regarding a summary, again, sharing the potential of any additional CSA costs, and again, the potential's there. If it's not, it's a wash. If I'm hearing the board on the landfill tipping fees, if you're splitting the difference with the EMT instructor class, and then the reduction for capital of $94,000, working with the CARES Act to receive that for that, you're balanced. But that's, again, the pleasure of the board.
We're balanced.
Landfill at $1?
Yes.
You good with that?
I'm good with it.
I'm good.
Okay, we need a motion and a vote
Yes, sir.
to adopt a modified budget.
Based on the changes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I make a motion that we adopt the budget, the modified budget, based on the changes that we just made.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there any more discussion? Mr. Cundy? All in favor of, Madam Clerk, if you agree?
All in favor, roll call.
On a motion made by Supervisor Tatum to pass the modified budget with the suggested difference made up by what we just talked about, which would be the $1 increase to the tipping fees, correct me if I'm wrong, $30,000 is a reallocation from the EMT instructor course, elimination, splitting the CSA fees with the school system, and then the final, was it 94? Yeah, 94,000
from capital, from IT.
from capital and IT. The thought that we may get that money back.
And
Is
can I
that-
ask one question? We've managed to do this with not cutting any services or laying any county employee off, correct?
Correct. And that was seconded, if we're in agreement with Supervisor Condon.
Okay. All in favor of the motion is read?
And I will start with Supervisor Mitchell,
Yes.
Supervisor Smith,
Yes.
Supervisor Carter,
No.
Supervisor Condon,
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum,
Yes.
and Chairman Mitchell.
Yes.
And I will again note that Supervisor Thompson is absent.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could we request that Mr. Whitlow give us just an overview document of what we've done comparatively over the previous modified budget?
You're talking about what we've done today?
Yes, sir.
Uh,
The reductions and the relative costs associated with that.
Yes, I don't think there'd be any problem.
Mr. Chairman,
So basically, we've got it all.
we do. There's one other item is to approve, now that the tax rate has been set, the budget's been adopted, there is an appropriation ordinance required. And I think, Brian, you work with legal counsel and
We have the resolution
Have the
that's gonna
resolution.
pin these changes, but we had it.
Yeah, depending on the final dollar figure.
Right.
And that will require
No, I mean, they're just adopting the total dollar amount with the amended changes, so this is the appropriation resolution.
Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, I'd like to go back to our discussion on the $50,000 for the volunteers, and if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that we use that $50,000 to support our volunteer fire departments until we can get back to norms and see what's going to happen.
Can we include the four rescue squads in that?
Yeah, the fire department, excuse me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I apologize.
And the 4 squads that are currently running,
Budget 5, got Snow Creek.
5 counts, Snow Creek.
It's Snow Creek, Lakeville, Callaway, Red Valley, Squirrel.
Give me 1 second.
That would be 50,000 divided 15 ways.
So it's roughly $3,300 each department. So, let me amend my motion, please. I'd like to amend my motion that we take $50,000 out of the contingency fund, leftover fund from this fiscal year, divide it up 15 ways. That would include the 10 fire departments and the 5 rescue squads that are currently active and running calls, which comes out to roughly $3,333.33.
I second.
Thank you.
Too far home,
Okay.
For 5 months now.
Don't ever give up now. We've got a motion and a second, discussion. And I will ask Mr. Carter, I think you made a comment maybe at our board meeting that there might be some money available that would maybe help the fire department more than this. I believe that you might think on that.
Well, from the CARES Act, but since we're not going to take any money out of the revenue fund to help the taxpayers, I'm going to vote with Mr. Mitchell on this to help the fire and rescue people.
And that was just a clarification. I'm not, I guess my thought was we may can still get some money from CARES.
I assume, I don't know.
What's up, Jack?
All right, all in favor of the motion as stated? Aye.
I think I'll do a roll call, if you're okay
Okay.
with that, Mr. Chairman.
I don't mind a roll call at all.
So on the motion made by Supervisor Mitchell to take the $50,000 out of the contingency fund and divide it 15 ways equally to the 10 volunteer fire stations and the 5 rescue squads that are currently running, that are currently active, seconded by Supervisor Cundiff.
Should we name those squads so that it's in the motion?
Scrubs, Red Valley.
You made an amendment, she didn't do.
I'm sorry.
Scruggs, Red Valley, this, I think,
Oh, I did include it. Yeah, you're right.
You made an amendment to your motion.
Yeah, she does have it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
and I'm just clarifying, and I don't think that would require the listing, yes. So Scruggs, Red Valley, what are they?
Glade Hill,
Thank you.
Snow Creek, and Callaway.
And that was seconded by Supervisor Cundiff. So now I will start the roll call. Is that okay, Mr. Chairman?
I did hear an amendment to the motion. And I think that came from you.
I think,
You gotta vote on the amendment,
You gotta vote on
and
the
then you vote on
amendment
the motion.
before you vote on the motion.
okay, so
And if
let's,
the motion, amendment carries, then you don't do the motion.
okay. So with the amendment, which from my understanding, the amendment was to add the 5 stations that we just listed. So let's, Mr. Chairman, take a vote on that.
Okay. All in favor of the motion as amended, roll call please.
Supervisor Mitchell,
Yes.
Supervisor Smith,
Yes.
Supervisor Carter, Supervisor Cundiff,
Yes.
Supervisor Tatum,
Yes.
and Chairman Mitchell,
Yes.
and Supervisor Thompson is absent.
Thank you.
And
Thank
the-
you, Ron.
Thank you. The
Thank
motion,
you,
the
Ken.
I expect Christmas
motion is.
Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would just like to thank Allison and Chief Ferguson. They have just ponied up some reductions to help the county. And, you know, they're here, and I think every department head would do the same. But they're here, and I just want to let you all know that we appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
When do I need to advertise this?
Well, I'll get with you.
Okay.
I think it's due time for an adjournment until June 16th, 2020, for our regular board of supervisors meeting.